Should I invest in SpaceX now that it's public? Here's the twist. If you already invest in normal index funds, you're very likely to become a SpaceX investor anyway. Most everyday investors don't build portfolios by handpicking a few hot stocks. They buy broad index funds and ETFs that track big benchmarks like the S&P 500 in the US or similar indices globally. An index fund is just a basket that automatically copies a list of companies in an index. If a company is in the index, the fund owns it. If it's removed, the fund sells it. When the index adds, deletes or reweights companies, the fund quietly adjusts in the background. SpaceX is now publicly traded, but here's what many people miss. Being public does not mean instant entry into the S&P 500 itself. The S&P 500 has strict rules. A company needs time trading on the market, consistent profitability, and a minimum share float that is actually available to the public. Right now, SpaceX only has a relatively small percentage of its shares floated, and it is still working toward the profitability and timing requirements. So it will likely only qualify for the S&P 500 inclusion a year or more after the IPO. In other words, the S&P 500 inclusion is very likely in the future, but not immediate. The Nasdaq and the FTSE Russell have altered their rules to accommodate SpaceX's fast entry. Here's the next surprise. Even if SpaceX is well worth over $1 trillion on paper, its index weight at the start will probably be small. The S&P 500 is float adjusted, which means it only counts the shares actually trading on the market when it calculates weights. Because SpaceX is floating just a small slice of its shares, early estimates suggest that on the first inclusion, it might only be around 0.1 to 0.2% of the S&P 500, not some massive 3 to 5% position that dominates your index fund. Over time, if more shares are released and the company grows, that weight can increase, but it starts off as a relatively small position in a very large index. What does that mean for you? If you already own broad S&P 500 index funds or total market ETFs, then once SpaceX eventually joins those indices, your funds will automatically buy SpaceX. You won't need to research the stock, time the news, or click buy on SpaceX directly. You'll own a small piece of SpaceX as part of a diversified portfolio, and that position will scale up naturally if the company grows and its index weight increases. So when someone asks, should I invest in SpaceX, they're actually thinking about a big concentrated bet on one exciting name. If SpaceX keeps winning and gets added to the big indices, you'll almost certainly have SpaceX in your portfolio anyway, just as a sensible size as part of everything else. The actual question is, should you overweight your portfolio by directly buying SpaceX stocks? If it's a hot stock, probably not in the short term as it's overvalued. However, the space industry itself has a lot of potential, and a thematic ETFs like UFO will gain you entry into the booming sector.